Sent a plumber to my daughter's house while she and her husband were away on a work trip. 2 hours after he arrived, he called me. His voice was so quiet I almost couldn't hear him over the traffic outside my window. "Sir," he said, "there's someone in the basement. I think she's been there a while." I had the keys because the house used to be mine. My name is Gilbert Price. I'm 67 years old, retired after 34 years with the Cook County Department of Family and Support Services in Chicago. I spent more than 3 decades walking into other people's homes and finding the things they hoped no one would ever find. I'm not a dramatic man. I don't exaggerate when I tell you that nothing in 34 years prepared me for what I found in my daughter's basement that Wednesday morning in October. I mean it. My daughter Wendy is 39. She married a man named Spencer about 5 years ago. He's 41. Works as a regional director for a logistics company, travels constantly, makes good money, and has never once looked me directly in the eye for longer than 3 seconds. I noticed that the first time she brought him to my apartment for Sunday dinner. Old habit. In my line of work, you notice things like that. Wendy and I were close once. After her mother passed from a stroke 8 years ago, it was just the two of us for a while. We'd talk every Sunday, meet for coffee on Saturdays when her schedule allowed. She'd call me just to check in, which is something most adult children stopped doing. Then Spencer came along, and the calls got shorter, then less frequent, then mostly just on holidays. I told myself it was normal. You get married, your priorities shift. I didn't want to be the father who complained. About 3 years ago, I sold the house I'd lived in since Wendy was 6 years old. A 2-story brick colonial on the north side of Evanston, 4 bedrooms, a big backyard where Wendy used to run through the sprinklers every summer. I'd been rattling around in it alone since her mother died, and the upkeep was getting to be too much for one person. Spencer had mentioned twice that they were looking to buy something with more space. The neighborhood was good, the commute to his office was reasonable. So I transferred ownership. Kept it at a price well below market, essentially a gift, structured as a sale for tax reasons. With a small remaining mortgage, I helped them refinance. My attorney told me I was being too generous. I told him family was family. The one thing I kept was a spare key. Not out of any suspicion, just old habit. Some instincts are too deep to give up. In the 2 years since they moved in, I'd been invited over exactly 4 times. Twice for holidays, once for a dinner party where I didn't recognize anyone else in the room, and once because the lawnmower needed fixing and Spencer didn't know how. The visits stopped after that. They were renovating, Wendy said, then they were too busy, then Spencer was traveling, there was always something. So when she called me on a Thursday night in early October, I was surprised enough that I fumbled my phone trying to answer it. "Dad, I need a favor." "No hello, no how are you, just straight to it." "Of course, what do you need?" Spencer's company sent him to a conference in Atlanta for 2 weeks. I'm going with him. It's a work thing, but also kind of a vacation for us. She paused. The water heater's been making noises. We're worried it might go while we're away and damage the floors. Could you call a plumber to look at it? We'd leave you the garage code. I almost asked why she couldn't just call a plumber herself. It takes 5 minutes. But when your daughter asks for help, even your increasingly distant daughter who can no longer find time for a Sunday coffee, you say yes. "I'll take care of it," I said. "Make sure they check the pipes in the basement too," she added. "The pressure's been off." She gave me the garage code and hung up before I could ask how she was doing. I called a plumber I knew, a man named Alfie who'd done work for me twice before at my apartment in Rogers Park and was reliable without being expensive. Told him I needed a full inspection on a water heater and basement plumbing at my daughter's place in Evanston. He said he could do it Wednesday morning. Wednesday came. I drove over to let him in at 8, showed him the utility room off the basement stairs, and headed back home. About 45 minutes into the job, my phone rang. "Mr. Price." Alfie's voice was wrong from the first syllable, flat and careful, like he was trying to stay calm. "You need to come back here." "What happened? Is it the heater?" A pause. "The heater's fine. There's another pause. "There's a room back here, behind the utility shelving. I wouldn't have noticed it, but I heard something. Someone moving around. I think someone's in there." The coffee cup in my hand stopped halfway to my mouth. "Don't go in," I said. "Don't touch anything. I'm on my way." I made it from Rogers Park to Evanston in 18 minutes. I know because I looked at the clock when I hung up and again when I pulled into the driveway. 18 minutes. I don't remember most of the drive. Alfie was standing at the top of the basement stairs when I came through the garage door. He's a big man, 60s, not easily rattled. He was rattled. "There's a false wall," he said, keeping his voice low as he led me down. "Behind the storage unit. I moved one of the shelves to check the pipe access, and there's a door back there." I could hear breathing. The basement had been finished since I'd sold the house. New drywall, gray paint, a utility room in the corner. The storage unit Alfie was talking about was a heavy metal shelving rack, the kind you bolt to the wall. One side had been pulled out on a hinge. I could see now that it wasn't bolted at all, just positioned to look that way. Behind it was a door, plain wood, no handle on the outside. Alfie had propped it open 6 inches with his boot. I pushed it open the rest of the way. The room was about 8 by 10 feet, no windows, a bare bulb on the ceiling switched off. The only light came from the door. In the far corner, on a cot with a wool blanket pulled up to her chin, was an old woman. She was looking at me. Her eyes were clear, but her face was so thin it took me a moment to understand what I was seeing. White hair, loose and unbrushed. She was wearing a housecoat that had been washed so many times it was almost translucent. On the floor beside the cot, a plastic pitcher, a sleeve of crackers, a paperback novel, face down on the concrete floor. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She just looked at me with eyes that had clearly given up, expecting anything good from people who opened that door. "Ma'am," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "My name is Gilbert Price. I used to own this house. Can you tell me your name?" A long silence. "Harriet," she said finally. "Harriet Voss." Voss, Spencer's mother. I'd met her exactly once at the wedding for approximately 20 minutes. She'd seemed like a small, quiet woman who laughed too quickly at her son's jokes. I'd forgotten she existed, which I understood now, had been very much by design. "Harriet, how long have you been down here?" She thought about it. Actually had to think. "I'm not sure," she said. "What month is it?" "October." I told her. Something shifted in her face. "Since March," she said. 7 months. I turned to Alfie. "Call 911. Tell them we need police and an ambulance. Don't leave." He already had his phone out. I went back to Harriet and sat down on the floor near her cot so she didn't have to look up at me. Old training. Make yourself smaller. Don't loom. In 34 years, I'd sat on a lot of floors in a lot of bad situations. This one felt different in a way I couldn't name yet. I was in a room that used to be my house in front of a woman whose son had married my daughter, and none of the training in the world had prepared me for the specific weight of that fact. "Are you in pain?" I asked. "Can you stand up?" "My hip is bad," she said. "I can walk a little, not far." "You don't have to go anywhere yet. Help is coming." I paused. "Are you hungry?" "I had crackers this morning." I looked at the sleeve on the floor. Nearly empty. "When did Wendy and Spencer leave?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Sunday, I think." 4 days ago. They usually leave food when they go. Spencer left a bag of groceries. I ate most of it. Usually. So this wasn't the first time they'd left her. "He travels a lot," Harriet said as if she were explaining something reasonable. "They can't always be here." The paramedics arrived within 10 minutes. 2 police officers came with them, one of them young enough to look like he should be in high school, the other a heavy-set woman named Officer Paulette Greer, who I would come to be grateful for over the following weeks. She was the kind of officer who took notes without being asked and asked questions without being dismissive. When I introduced myself and mentioned my background, she didn't treat it like a credential I was flashing. She just nodded and said, "Okay, walk me through it from the beginning." I did. While the paramedics checked Harriet's vitals, her blood pressure was dangerously low, they said, and she was severely dehydrated. Officer Greer and I went back through the basement. She photographed everything. The false wall, the hinged shelving unit, the cot, the crackers, the plastic pitcher. I watched her face as she documented it, She'd been doing this long enough that her expression didn't change, but I saw the slight tightening around her eyes when she saw the picture. "No bathroom," she said. I'd noticed there was a bucket near the far corner. I hadn't said anything about it yet. "No," I said. "Harriet was taken to Evanston Hospital by ambulance. I rode in my car behind them, called my attorney on the way, a man named Ted Okafor who I'd worked with on cases over the years and trusted completely. Left him a voicemail explaining the situation in as few words as I could manage without losing detail. Then I called Wendy. She answered on the third ring. I could hear Atlanta in the background. Lobby sounds, a lot of people. "Dad, is something wrong with the heater?" "The heater's fine," I said. "Wendy, I need you to tell me about Harriet Voss." The silence that followed was long enough that I knew the answer before she gave it. "What about her?" Her voice had changed, careful now, controlled. "The plumber found the room in the basement," I said. "She's been taken to the hospital. She's dehydrated and her blood pressure is critically low. She told me she's been down there since March." "Dad, it's not she has needs that are very complex, and we were looking into facilities, but the good ones have wait lists, and in the meantime she needed somewhere safe." "Wendy," I kept my voice quiet, "stop." She stopped. "A woman has been living in a hidden room in your basement for 7 months. There was a bucket for a bathroom. She'd run out of food. I'm not calling to hear an explanation right now. I'm calling because I thought you deserved to hear this from me first, before the police contact you." Another silence. Then Spencer's voice in the background asking what was wrong. Then Wendy, muffled, telling him something I couldn't hear. Then she came back on. "We're coming home," she said. "I'd imagine so," I said. "The police will want to speak with both of you." The call ended. At the hospital, they told me Harriet needed IV fluids and monitoring, possible early-stage kidney stress from the dehydration. Her hip, which had been bothering her before she came to live with them, she'd had a partial replacement 2 years ago, had worsened from lack of movement. She hadn't walked more than a few feet in weeks. I went in to see her once they had her settled in a room. She was on an IV drip, a little more color in her face already, and she looked at me when I sat down beside the bed the way that people look at you when they've stopped expecting to be looked at. "Your daughter didn't know I was there," Harriet said. "It wasn't quite a question." I considered that. "What do you mean?" "At first she didn't. Spencer told her I'd gone to live with a cousin in Michigan. Later she knew. But she didn't choose it. I think she was afraid of him. She said it very quietly, like she was still working out whether to believe it herself. I don't know. I tell myself that. I didn't say anything. I'd spent 34 years sitting with complicated truths and learning which ones needed commentary and which ones just needed to be heard. This was the second kind. "Do you have any other family?" I asked. "Someone I can contact?" "A niece in Phoenix. We haven't spoken in years. I wasn't easy to be around after my husband died. I pushed people away." She looked at the IV in her arm. "Spencer offered to let me live with them. I thought it was a kindness." I thought about what kindness looks like from the inside of a hidden room. I didn't say that either. Ted Okafor called me back at 6 that evening. I was in the hospital cafeteria with terrible coffee, waiting for nothing in particular except to be somewhere nearby. "Tell me everything," he said. I did. He listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I'd always valued about him. "All right," he said when I finished. "Spencer is the primary exposure here. Harriet Voss has no legal guardian on record. I'll verify that, which means this is straightforwardly criminal. False imprisonment at minimum, dependent adult neglect, which in Illinois carries serious weight. If she was isolated specifically to prevent her from accessing care or communicating with family, there is potential for financial abuse charges too, depending on what her accounts look like." "Check her accounts," I said. "I bet her Social Security income was redirected." A pause. "How confident are you?" "Confident enough." "And your daughter?" I was quiet for a moment. "That depends on what the investigation finds. You understand that if Wendy had knowledge of this—" "I understand," I said. "Do what needs to be done. All of it." Ted arranged for a consult with an elder law attorney colleague of his named Patricia Hahn, who would handle Harriet's immediate legal protections. By the following morning, Harriet had a temporary legal advocate appointed by the court, and her financial accounts had been flagged pending investigation. What they found was what I expected to find. Her Social Security checks, $1,340 a month, had been deposited into a joint account that Spencer held. Withdrawals matched car lease payments and subscription services. Not a cent of it had been spent on Harriet. Spencer and Wendy landed at O'Hare Friday afternoon. The police were waiting. Spencer was taken in for questioning. He lawyered up within the hour, which told me everything about how prepared he'd been for this moment. Maybe not this specific moment, but the possibility of it. People don't retain attorneys that fast unless they've been quietly planning for contingencies. Wendy was questioned separately. I wasn't there. I found out later, through Ted, that she'd told investigators she'd believed for the first month that Spencer's mother had gone to a cousin in Michigan, and that when she discovered the truth in late spring, Spencer had convinced her it was temporary, that he was handling the paperwork for a memory care facility, that everything was under control. According to Wendy, she'd wanted to move Harriet out of the basement, but was afraid of what Spencer would do. I don't know how much of that I believe. I don't know if Wendy knows how much of it she believes. What I know is what the medical record showed, what the financial record showed, what the photograph of that room looked like, 8 by 10 feet with a hinged false wall and a plastic bucket in the corner. I went to see Harriet every day she was in the hospital. She was there for 6 days. On the 3rd day, she was moved to a regular room, and on the 4th, she asked a nurse if she could get a library card because she'd finished her paperback and wanted something new to read. I took that as a good sign. "Your son-in-law is going to say it was for my own good," she told me on the 5th day. She was sitting up in bed now, eating actual food, the color almost fully back in her face. That I needed supervision, that the room was safe. "He can say whatever he wants," I said. "The evidence says something different. Do you think he'll go to prison?" In Illinois, criminal neglect of an elderly person is a felony. With the financial exploitation charges added, Spencer was looking at serious time if the prosecution built the case properly. I'd already spoken with the victim's advocate at the state's attorney's office who'd been assigned to Harriet's case. A meticulous woman named Officer Greer had connected me with, and she was building it properly. "I think there will be consequences," I said, "real ones." Harriet nodded slowly. "I want you to know," she said, "that I don't blame your daughter entirely. I know that's not what you'd expect me to say. You don't have to protect her." "I'm not. I'm just being accurate." She folded her hands in her lap. "She's not a bad person who did a bad thing. She's a frightened person who let a bad thing continue. Those are different. The law might not see it that way, but I do." I thought about Wendy at 17, staying up all night when her mother was sick the first time. I thought about who she'd been before Spencer and who she'd become gradually, incrementally in the years since. I thought about what fear looks like from the inside, how it can make the walls of a situation feel permanent when they aren't. Harriet was discharged on a Tuesday. A bed had opened at a highly regarded assisted living facility in Skokie. Not a last resort, but a genuinely good place with an activities director and a physical therapy wing for her hip. Ted's colleague Patricia had worked with the state to ensure Harriet's back Social Security payments were recovered and a proper trust structure put in place, with a neutral fiduciary managing her finances. No family members with access, no joint accounts. I drove her there myself. She sat in a passenger seat with a new paperback from the hospital gift shop and didn't say much. When we pulled up to the facility, she looked at the entrance for a moment. The flower beds, the bench near the door, a woman sitting outside in a cardigan in the October sun. "It looks like a real place," Harriet said. "It is," I said. She nodded. "Good." Spencer was formally charged 11 days later. 2 felony counts of criminal neglect of an elderly person, 1 count of financial exploitation of an elderly individual. His attorney entered a not guilty plea which surprised no one. The trial date was set for the following spring. In the meantime, he was released on bond and prohibited from any contact with Harriet. Wendy was not charged. The state's attorney determined there was insufficient evidence that she had initiated or actively directed the situation, and that her cooperation with investigators supported a witness classification rather than a defendant one. I don't know if that's justice or just the limits of what can be proven. Probably both. I've spoken to Wendy 3 times since that October. Brief conversations, careful on both sides. She told me she was in therapy. I told her that was good. She told me she didn't know how to fix what happened. I told her I didn't know either, and that honesty seemed like the right place to start. I'm not certain what my daughter is or isn't capable of. I spent 34 years being certain about other people's children, and I learned that certainty is usually just the story you tell yourself before all the facts come in. I'm trying to let the facts come in. What I'm certain about is Harriet. I visit her on Wednesdays now. She's in physical therapy for her hip, and her progress has been, according to her therapist, remarkable for her age. She's joined a book club at the facility and described the other members to me last week with a dry precision that made me laugh out loud for the first time in a while. She's got opinions, sharp ones. I like her considerably. 2 weeks ago, she told me something I've been turning over since. We were sitting in the common room near a window that faced the parking lot. Not a great view, but the afternoon light came in at an angle that made even the parking lot look decent. I used to think, she said, that getting old meant becoming invisible, like the world just stops registering you. She looked at her hands. I think I let myself accept that too early. You were alone, I said. That's not the same as accepting it. She thought about that. Maybe not, she said, but I want to be the kind of person who would have fought harder. I'm not sure I was. I'm working on it. I drove home that Wednesday and sat at my kitchen table for a while in the quiet. My apartment is small, just what I need, nothing extra. There's a cork board above the desk where I used to pin case notes before I retired, and now it's mostly empty. I tacked something up on it that night, just a note I wrote on a scratch of paper so I wouldn't forget. It said, "The plumber called because I asked him to check the pipes." I look at it sometimes. I think about how many things happen because someone, for some ordinary reason, checked something they might have left alone. I think about the 34 years I spent being the person who showed up. How those instincts, as I said, don't retire. They just wait. I keep thinking about the crackers. A half-empty sleeve on a concrete floor, next to a plastic pitcher and a paperback novel with the spine cracked from being read too many times. That's what 7 months look like, reduced to its smallest physical evidence. And I keep coming back to it because I think that's where the whole story lives. Not in the courtroom filings or the financial records or the felony charges, but in that image. Someone made a choice, and another person paid for it in crackers and silence and a hip that got worse from not walking. I've spent a lot of years thinking about cause and consequence. In my work, you had to. Every situation I walked into had a history, a long chain of decisions, small and large, that led to the moment I was standing in someone's doorway. Nothing happened without a reason. That didn't make the reasons acceptable. It just meant you had to follow the chain all the way back if you wanted to understand what you were actually dealing with. Spencer made a series of choices. Each one probably felt, in the moment, like the manageable next step. Move her in. Keep her out of sight. Tell Wendy she'd gone to Michigan. Redirect the checks. Each decision made the next one easier, the way a path through the woods gets worn smoother the more you walk it. By the time there was a hidden room with a hinged false wall, he'd been walking that path long enough that I suspect he'd stopped seeing it clearly at all. That's what happens when you let something wrong become routine. It doesn't stay in front of you where you can see it. It recedes into the background, becomes infrastructure. And then one day a plumber moves a shelving unit to check a pipe, and all of it comes back into the light. What I've thought about most, though, isn't Spencer. It's Harriet. She told me she let herself accept invisibility too early, that she wanted to be the kind of person who would have fought harder. I've turned that over many times since she said it because I think she's being too hard on herself. And also, I think she's exactly right, and I'm not sure those two things contradict each other. What she had, when it mattered most, was a quality that doesn't get enough credit. She stayed honest with herself. Even in that room, even after months of it, she didn't build a comfortable story around what was happening to her. She knew what it was. She held on to that knowledge even when it would have been easier to let it go. That kind of clarity, the willingness to see a situation without flinching away from it, is something people spend their whole lives avoiding. Harriet had it, even when everything else had been taken from her. And now watching her in physical therapy, describing her book club with that dry precision that makes me laugh. I see the other thing, the capacity to rebuild. Not dramatically, not all at once, just showing up on a Tuesday and doing the work that Tuesday requires, and then doing the same thing Wednesday. That's what resilience actually looks like from the inside. It's not a feeling, it's a practice. I think about my daughter too, more than I let on. I don't know yet who Wendy is on the other side of all this. I don't know how much she chose, how much she was afraid, how much she convinced herself didn't require action. I'm trying to follow the chain without rushing to the end of it. What I know is that Alfie called because I asked him to check the pipes. That's the whole thing, really. I asked someone to look at something, and he looked, and what was hidden stopped being hidden. Sometimes that's all it takes, someone willing to look.